Hey guys, we're back for another episode of In the Trenches. Our guest today works in A&R and publishing at Warner Chappell Music. He also helped establish the very popular social media platform Country Central. But before we get into the episode, I'm gonna remind y'all, please like, share, and subscribe. So, without any further ado, the Benji Chord. Benji,
my friend,
thank you for being here,
good
brother.
to see you, brother. Thank you for the invitation.
I only know you as the Benji Chord. So of course that's what I mean. But hell, everybody since the Instagram word, everybody calls me Spidey. So it's
exactly
like, go with it, right?
It was funny. I mean, literally, my full name's Benjamin. But when I moved here, like all the artists would call me Benji, and I was like, oh, why do they call me? I was like, okay, I made the damn profile, the Benji Chord. And then I met my now boss, and his name's Ben as well. And then there's writers and artists that we work with that are named Ben. And he's like, what are you gonna go by when you move here? And I was like, I could probably just go by my name, Ben. And he's like, it might get confusing now that you kind of made this thing stick. And I was like, you know what? Fresh start. Alias, but aliases can go wrong. It's like the first week in town, I went to Ben Burgess's Opry debut, and they put me on the list, but they put me not as Benji or Ben or anything. They put me as not even the Benji Chord, just Ben Chord. So I go up in security, I'm going backstage, and they're like, let me see your ID. Nowhere on my ID says Ben Chord. And they made me turn around, then like the label's like, where are you? And I'm like, oh, they got my name wrong. So they go, wait, we'll get it. So aliases can go wrong.
Okay. Does it have anything to do with songwriting?
I guess in my brain, when I did it, it was like probably 2018. I made that profile online, and I just love guitar. Grew up on like the first band I saw on MTV was Nirvana. Made me pick up a guitar, fell in love with it, taught myself how to play it. And yeah, I was like, you know what? I love playing guitar. My name's Ben. Let's make it something interesting. And the Benji Chord was born. But people would DM me and be like, is it a play on words for bungee cord? And I'm like, oh, Lord, like, what did I get myself into?
I didn't think about that one.
Yeah.
I mean, probably music. I was thinking not chords in a song, but yeah,
yes,
okay.
Yeah.
You said Nirvana.
Nirvana. That was the gateway.
Are you a MTV junkie? Did you
Come
watch?
on, Headbangers Ball.
Metallica,
make MTV great again is kind of my mantra. You know, I mean, I miss those days, but it's how I discovered so much music.
Sure.
And obviously, I'm from Texas, so like, I mean, I grew up with country on the radio. I was born in the '90s, so country was like pop music at that time.
Okay.
So I would hear it. I remember my mom would always be super stubborn with her radio dial, and she would keep on this adult contemporary radio station. But country music would be played on that all the time. Tim McGraw, Faith Hill, Kenny. Okay. And I didn't even know it was country. I just thought it was music at the time. But rock and roll was really like made me like passionate. I was like a liner note kid. I'd read like who the producers were, the guitar players. Like I knew all that random information. And just the older I got, the more passionate I got about it. And I fell in love with every kind of band, every era of rock. You know, I love Blink-182, Green Day, Good Charlotte, all those kind of bands. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I mean, I'm no pro guitar. I know how to get through a song, but rock songs are a little more technical and difficult. Mm-hmm. I just remember getting frustrated. And honestly, it wasn't until like I went to college. I went to UT in Austin, and girls I'd be interested in, I'd be like, hey, who's your favorite artist? And they'd be like, Kenny Chesney or Tim McGraw. And I'd go back and learn all the songs. I'm like, oh, these songs are so easy because country music is a beautiful thing. It's 3 chords and the truth.
You discovered country from trying to.
I became an incredibly passionate country fan.
Necessity is the root of all.
You know what I mean? So guitar, I love guitar. That helped me really learn like how they build simple like chords and structures around like these sprawling stories and these like relatable stories. So country music to me, I joke it's like grad school for rock and roll kids, emo kids, and it just is the coolest place for me to be right now because you see Nashville, like it's a blend of all those different eras and influences. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of alternative rock in Nashville now. There's singer-songwriters in Nashville now. There's Americana. There's pop. There's everything in between, and those are all. I grew up on everything. You know what I mean? Like I'm a first generation American. Like my parents moved here from Nigeria. My mom moved here. Her dad was a preacher.
Here meaning where did they move?
They moved straight to California. My mom was 15 when she moved to the States, and her dad was a preacher, so he had money to send her to Georgia. She went to school there, went to California for nursing school. And my dad came from like nothing. He was like one of 7, and he was just like the one, the genius kid, the whiz kid, and he was able to, get a scholarship for engineering to go straight to California at USC. So for me, it's like they saw this world through like, they got here one route, hard work, you know, all that great stuff. Whereas like I'm one of 4 kids and we're seeing this whole world in our own eyes, completely different perspective. And for me, it was like, oh, I had all these influences. I was a kid that loved music, heard it a little differently than my siblings and my friends, but you know, my parents got here one way. And so for me, it was like, what I'm going to do is like this. It's very, very narrow. Like do what your dad did so you can be successful, make money. And I was like, oh, well, I love music, but the only way I thought as a kid to do music was be in a band. And I'm like, I can't do that. I'd be sick on tour bus after one weekend. You know what I mean? But
Sure.
it took me years, you know, like later in my life to figure out, oh, there's all these different angles in music that, like, to your point, if you're passionate, like you can and feel a need for somebody, you can exist in this world.
Sure. I honestly, with film, I kind of discovered it similarly. I fell into it. My dad I was trying to be a Navy SEAL. I was training to be a Navy SEAL. That's what I wanted to do.
And where are you from originally?
Your town.
Good old
Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas?
That's where I'm from. Spring, Texas, to be specific, which was 23 miles south or west.
I think it's I think it's north
of Houston.
Downtown.
I kind of though my Houston years were my adventurous years. You know, it wasn't until we moved to San Diego that I started to really get into the culture of music.
That was me when I went to college in Austin. That was really when I was like, oh, I'm going to experience everything. You know what I mean?
For me, it was like what I had a lot of friends, you know, just like in the garage, you know, they were playing, they wanted to be the artists, you know, and I think I was scared.
Definitely same here.
To do it, you know. A few times they would throw the mic at me and I would hear myself and just it didn't have the confidence for it. But I was really into like the fashion of it. Like they were cool looking and I saw the scene of it. And I was an MTV, I studied MTV.
Same.
You know, so where it sounds like you discovered music for yourself in the actual melodies and the notes and the construction of the song.
Exactly.
Me, I gravitated towards, I guess, the visuals, you know.
That was such a big part of that era, was like tying a song to a visual. And a lot of times a song would really have a moment when the music video came out on MTV.
Absolutely.
And that's how I discovered like Soundgarden. Like I saw the Black Hole Sun music video, like Foo Fighters, I saw Everlong, and
we saw probably a lot of my pop punk videos because they were retired one after another, run after another, 65 straight days at number one. Boom, you know, Good Charlotte, Simple Plan,
those
all
were.
of them.
I mean, literally, I took like that, like grunge era, and then pop punk was literally for people my age. Like Blink-182 is the band that I just was on fire about. And my jokes, since my parents like aren't from here and I'm first generation, like. The only rule they really had was like you go to class, you're back like right after school. So very strict in that regard. But entertainment, they didn't really know. So there's no restrictions. So I could go to Target or Walmart and be like, I want this Blink-182 Enema of the State record, and parental advisory, and like the cashier would be like, oh, do you want to buy this for him? And they'd be like, my mom, of course. She wouldn't even think differently. So I was able to really dive into music, into film, into art, and like with no restrictions. So that's why I think I was such like a creative person in that regard growing up.
I would take CDs. Like you sound like you would take. I didn't really read the liner notes per se, but again, comparing your interest, how music affected you musically, mine visually, I can say that I would cut out the photos, even if some of them were this big. You know, from like the Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses. And I would build these collages.
I love that.
And these collages had big, you know, I would cut magazines. I would ride my bike sometimes a couple miles to get a magazine that had Eddie Vedder looking dope. Just like, what?
Oh, they were so
You know
cool.
what I mean? And it think about what I had to do. I had to either beg my mom for a couple bucks. I had to ride my bike to the grocery or wherever and ride it back and live inside that photo or photo spread.
Yeah.
And nowadays, when we're just littered with it, I'll get into that later, but wasn't there it felt, maybe I'm biased because I lived it. It felt as if there was a bit more of a mystery or a magistry to
Oh, I mean,
what you were discovering.
I remember every summer since my parents were from Nigeria. My dad, he was a petroleum engineer. He went to college for that, and like he started his own oil and gas company. And then one of 4 kids, so like he ended up moving his company to Nigeria to run it there. And my mom's just like, hey, like I want my kids to go to college here, all that good stuff. So she raised us all from Spring, Texas. And my dad was over in Nigeria.
Spring, it's crazy you're from Spring.
So every summer I'd go visit my dad. I'd intern for him at his company. And I would take my favorite albums with me. And like to your point, like it was a magical moment. And that's really where I'd spend a whole summer in a place where it's much more developed now. But then it's like, hey, I had my CD player, I had my CDs, and like I would escape. You know what I mean? And I'd be like,
bag, your pouch of CDs.
that's it.
I'll
never forget
all
whether
the way.
it's like Blink-182 self-titled or Simple Plans album, like Green Day, American Idiot. I would just dive into those records, and like I'd come back from like a summer in Nigeria for like 3-4 months, and I'd be like, oh, like I've mastered these records. I know everything about them.
That's awesome.
You know,
we did. I think I did every video from. You said Simple Plan. What was the one? The one of something in the balls.
no pads, no helmets.
That one. I think we did like 7 videos from that album.
I remember being such an angsty teenager. I had a 2-parent household. Like all my siblings, like very close quarters to me. Yet, like when I heard that song "Perfect" by Simple Plan, man, I was like the angstiest kid. I was like, this is about my dad. I'm like. You know what I mean? I was like, and years later, I have such a different appreciation for like all the hard work he put in. Like he was doing all that just for us. But at the time, I'm like, he's not here. Let me dive into these records and have an experience. Like that song was such, and that music video, that really was like the gateway.
Yeah.
I think it tied everything together, which is amazing.
When did metal come in? Rock come in?
Oh, I mean, rock, like I said, rock was the gateway for me. And country followed. Okay. Country is just like what I would always hear on the radio. Rock is where I was buying all the records, and I was like trying to learn how to play
Who would be
guitar.
like some of your top 5 influential rock bands?
I know just my favorite.
And it can be anything.
My favorite rock band's Foo Fighters. Obviously, I love Nirvana. And like by the time when I was a kid, I was born in 1990. Like obviously, like, you know, Kurt Cobain had already passed at that time, and Dave Grohl was doing Foo Fighters, but that was it. And I even like fashioned the way I play guitar, like because he just literally plays like he's playing drums. So I feel like I probably am not the most technical guitar player because I strum way too hard. You know what I mean? Like I'm playing a drum kit. But Foo Fighters for sure, Nirvana. Obviously, I love Metallica, just a Master of Puppets, like, and that's really when I learned.
Master of Puppets might be my actually favorite that album. Absolutely.
But that's when I learned, like, hey, like I may not be cut out for rock and roll guitar because like this stuff is way too technical for me. Like I'm a guy that like I feel the lyrics, you know what I mean, and like all that. But
they were shredding. And
obviously, Soundgarden's a huge influence for me. I loved hair metal. Like I loved it. Like I wasn't born in that era, but like I loved Def Leppard, like Portion of Sugar on Me, Photograph, all those like Love Bites. It's like I'm just such a guy for anthemic stuff that like takes like love, like a simple lyric, and then you put this huge like grand production around it. And it elevates it. You know what I mean? So like that was always the thing I cared about the most. And that's why music videos were so important to me too, because you would tie that to it. And I was a kid too with my strict parents. Never went to a concert till my senior year of high school. And the first concert I ever went to was Good Charlotte.
Oh my gosh.
All Time Low, Third Eye Blind, Hanson, and Boys Like Girls. It was called a Bamboozle Roadshow.
Okay. And
they would just travel the country instead of like just doing one, festival one day in like New Jersey. They would travel the country. They came to Houston, Texas. And these are bands I listened to my whole life. And it was the first time I got to see them all in one place. I just remember being like a senior in high school. I took my little brother with me and dragged him with me and had the time of my life. And then so when I moved to Austin for college, it was like music every single week. I would have there's a venue called Emo's, like 15 minutes away from my apartment. I'll just go there like every other week. All my favorite bands would come through there. Sure. A band that I ended up loving later was like a band called The Maine from Arizona, and they would come to Austin every single year. And they come and they play, and I'd fall more in love with that music. And they came one year with Augustana, and I love that band growing up. They had that Boston song.
Boston. I almost did that video.
Incredible.
Didn't do it, but I was a front runner, and then someone who, God, I forget.
And my favorite thing about music is I'm such like a discography junkie, like a catalog junkie, and I'm the type of guy that if I hear my favorite rock band or pop punk band like cover anything country, singer songwriter. I remember going to see The Maine at Emo's in Austin with Augustana, and they did a cover of it's called Tom Petty, Walls. And like I'd known all the hits of Tom Petty. I never heard that song, Walls. It was a deep cut. And I remember going back home, diving in, learning everything I could about Tom Petty. And then they did cover Ryan Adams' Dance All Night. And I had never heard Ryan Adams at the time. And I hear this song. I remember going home, typing that in on the internet and like finding that song, listening to the original, falling in love with that, and then being like, I need to know everything about this artist. And I've always been that way, whether it's rock music, whether it's country music. If I just heard like a hook or a modern version of it, I'd be like, let me dive into it. And it's funny with Ryan Adams, he had a song called When the Stars Go Blue. And Tim McGraw actually made that a single. He had covered that song. It was a huge hit for him back in the day. And I'm like, oh, there's so many like, through lines, so much alignment for like all my influences. I'm like, oh, I can listen to whatever I want. I shouldn't restrict myself. I remember growing up listening to like all this rock music. And then my friends at high school, white or black, would be like, why are you listening to Yellow Card? Like, why don't you listen to like rap? And I'm like, why does it matter? I just remember like, it doesn't matter. And the older I got, I realized I'm like, all my influences would bleed through to all these different artists. And I'm like, I think I have the right plan. I have the right strategy with how I listen, how I love music. It's like no restriction. And I think now being in Nashville now, it's like, there's almost no restrictions as to what kind of music you can make.
No, not
I feel like
at all.
everybody does what they want. As long as there is vision and a real fan base that cares, like you can go at whatever direction you want to.
It seems like definitely like I was saying just right when you got here, I love your passion and your love for music and what you do. I feel it. And I believe I was saying that that's probably one of my superpowers. I still love what I do, and artists and people who hire me know that. So you chose not to follow in kind of family footsteps and move to Nashville.
Yeah.
Right.
It took me a long time to figure that out because I was afraid as a dog to like take a risk when I was young. I was like so risk averse. I'm like, yeah, I have all these other influences, but what if I do that and I fail? I was like just, paralyzed by that idea. So I went to college, UT in Austin for petroleum engineering.
Oh, wow.
I remember like, my dad went to USC, so that was always something I idolized. Like he was like my Superman, so I'd always chase his tail in a lot of ways. And I remember like to get into USC, you had to do everything. You had to interview, to do 100 interviews, all this crazy stuff. I made sure I got good grades, all that. And I get in, and I remember my dad always being like, yeah, I want you to go to USC. I'd love for you to. And when I got the offer, he's like, what? And my parents, like, they did well for themselves, but I remember USC was like $60,000 to go to, whereas UT in state was like $8,000. Okay. So he's like, and then UT is like, it's Texas, oil country. He's like, you're going to go to UT. I remember being so upset, so annoyed, being such like a petty kid about it and being like, well, all right, I guess I'll go. And I don't regret it. I think
it might have pushed you.
It helped. It made me more creative. I went to Austin, fell in love with that environment, and I studied engineering, was not really inspired by it, really struggled, like more so less than like academics, just like a man, like definitely I tried everything, like probably lost myself a couple times out there, but all that to say, eventually, it's funny how it works. Like I really wasn't doing a ton in Austin after school. I just would like be around really brilliant people. And startups really exploded when I was living out there.
Okay,
2014, 2015. And so like there'd be companies out there that'd be, hey, like we're looking to invest in oil and gas. I'd like help my dad like when he's living over there, but hey, there's this company looking for this. And eventually I'm like, hey, I'm not really making a career out of anything here. Yeah. And there's a family friends like, hey, we have a chemical company back home. You can work here full time. So I'm like, I guess I'll hang my head and run back home. And I did that and just stayed home and just worked in that industry for a bit. And really, I think the biggest touch point to start getting the ball rolling for music was I was working a full-time job, but there's two really big country stations in Houston. And I saw like just an ad online where they're like, we're hiring for social media, for promo. And radio always needs more promo people to throw out there, hand out free tickets. And I did it part-time. But that filled my cup so much. I was like such a music nerd. So my program director at the time, his name is Johnny Chang. He has since moved to Pandora. So he works at Pandora, does a lot of work with country artists here in Nashville. And I just bothered him, but hey, like, why? So this song was a hit. Like, how come you're not playing this follow? How come this follow-up can't be a number one? And like, I'd just ask him all these random questions. And like, I'd have my coworkers be like, why do you care? You know what I mean? But like, for me, like, I loved it. I'd meet artists like Riley Green when he's gone on his first radio tour. Like when Florida Georgia Line was on top of the world, like I'd see them, they come to do their radio stuff, and I would just like fall in love with the process and everything the artist has to do, all the work that they put in, to get these songs, to go all the way. And love that process so much. Would go, like, set up rodeo shows. Like, so I'd go to see Cody Johnson all the time, Parker McCullum, all that. George Strait would play the rodeo, and it was like my favorite thing ever. And it was maybe around 2018, 2019, right before the pandemic hit. My dad actually, like, he was still living in Nigeria, but he's like, man, I've been feeling kind of off. I've been sick. And we didn't know what it was. So he comes home. I've never seen him like that, like light, skinny, dropped like 20, 30 pounds. I'm like in a wheelchair when we picked him up from the airport. And from then I was like, I moved directly home. Because it's myself and my little brother. Like my little brother was like graduating college, and like we were the only two in the family that really weren't settled, truly. Like my older brother's in Dallas, had his house out there, full career. My sister's a pharmacist in downtown Houston, the hospital. So it's like they can't be called upon this. I think it was a universe God thing where it's like, hey, you're the kind of guy that you always need to feel or be passionate about something. Well, I'm going to put you in a place where you're going to be passionate and like devoted to your family. So I moved back home, and I just like, we figured it out, I took care of my dad, take him to the hospital to figure out what this was, and it wasn't until literally like 2020 when everything was locked down, we're stuck at home, that he really declined. And we got a call from his doctor. He's like, you have ALS. And my dad, like the most genius guy, mathematician, scientific brain, and he didn't even know what it was. I just remember like hearing that news and like completely breaking down, and like my parents just like didn't even really know like the enormity of the situation. And I'll never forget that day, because it's the same day that Hardy released his music video to Give Heaven Some Hell. So I remember that music video comes out, and I just remember like watching it and like breaking down, bawling. And like my older brother had like, drove like from Dallas back home. And like the moment I'm just like in my bedroom, like on the ground, my brother comes in, like that song is just blaring, and it was just such a touch point moment for me where I'm like, that song obviously is about loss, but it's also like an anthemic song about like, hey, celebrating that person. And then for me, I was like, oh, like my dad's still here. He's still going. He's like 5 years has had it, still kicking, still wants to be here. Still, the mind is still sharp. And I'm like, hey, like I need to celebrate him. And I remember being a kid, always like feeling bad about him not being there all the time and almost resenting him a lot of times. You know what I mean? But then I guess God's like, hey, like you always wanted this. You always wanted time with him. I'm going to give it to you. Probably not the most ideal situation or scenario, but I got that time. I got time with him every single day. Could look at his face, and I could be really disciplined and driven to be like, I need to be a good person right now. And I'm kind of stuck in this place right now, but I think I became a better son, a better man. I'll be better for everybody in the future, So it was really tough, but during all that time was just when this country music thing started calling my name. I was like blessed enough to just be at home. I had started the Benji chord, and I'd just be a guy just playing guitar to my favorite country songs. And I don't even sing, so I just like throw it out there. And no one knew who I was, so I was just throw it out in the ether. Didn't care.
That's pretty brave of you, though, to even do that.
I'll never forget. There's one time I actually sang, posted on YouTube, a Luke Combs song, Moon Over Mexico. And I remember posting it out there, and I could not hit a note. I remember seeing comments on something like, oh, like it's so good or whatever. And then one guy's like, brother, good on you for posting out there, but your tone is off. And then I remember seeing a comment, and it was like, at the time, it was like Luke's videographer. He's like, hey, like, dude, like, this is awesome. Like, good on you for just putting yourself out there. He's like, I work with Luke, and like, this is awesome. And I just remember being like,
Zach?
He's not there anymore. So I just remember being like, oh, that's interesting. And honestly, just by chance, a guy that was in his 20s had just started like an Instagram page, and just he was covering like country music and just being like, hey, like Kane Brown's releasing a song this week. And I'd be the guy just in the comments being like, oh yeah, Kane wrote this with Ashley Gorley, wrote with all these writers. And I'll do that enough times, like for a couple posts in 2020 where he's like, how the hell, he just DM'd me, he's like, how the hell do you know who all these people are? And I just was like, well, in country music, like there's this very cool community of songwriters and creatives, and it could be the same guys or girls that write for the biggest male artists, female bands, everything in between. It's such a unique community here in Nashville. Sure. And he and I essentially just put our brains together, because he was a graphic designer by trade. So he had worked in a lot of hip hop media prior to all that. And I was like, hey, like you caught my eye, and you're catching other people's eyes, but like, let's put our brains together and let's kind of give fans kind of an inside look into Nashville. Because at the time, the pandemic's when country really had its second wind, the biggest like kind of boom since the 90s, with between Morgan, Luke blowing up, Zach Bryan had appeared, Lainey Wilson's getting going, you know what I mean? And I was like, Morgan's doing the thing, and I just remember being like, hey, let's cover every single day, like let's cover something about country. Like there's music coming out all the time now, it's streaming. And we made just a thing about every week, like let's talk about all the songs that are coming out, and every Monday, like let me write about my 5 or 6 favorite songs that came out each week. And I'm going to dive deep about these songs, whether they're singles, deep cuts, whatever it was. I'm going to write about my favorite country songs. And it became, I credit him so much because he was the most crazy ADD organized guy ever, where like, so every single week you'd expect like a feature kind of situation.
Are we talking Country Central? Country Central, that's right where I wanted to be. Bam!
Come on, right on cue.
Country Central, I definitely want to dedicate a few long minutes to it because I remember, and I'm not a very face guy in town. I don't really get out much. I kind of just
you were an enigma to me for years. You know what I mean? You were an enigma.
Yeah, but it was. I was telling my wife, I'm like, babe, this is good. Mm-hmm. It was consistent. It was hip. It was visual. Yes. It was informative.
Yep.
And it was not being all cliche. It was poking and having a couple roasty roasts.
I know, oh man, it was stressing me out so much because like my role there, I joked, I'm like, I was the politician of the group. Like they could be the guys behind the screen, you know, talking smack or whatever, but I was a guy really where I was like, hey, let's not only write about our favorite songs, but like let's spotlight and highlight the creators behind the scenes. Let's make sure every reader or listener knows who the writers are. So that's what happened. Like I'd write about my favorite songs. I'd give my opinion about how I felt, how it would be success-wise, what it made me feel, certain lines, how the hook would turn, all that kind of stuff. And before I knew it, like songwriters I've respected my whole life were like, thank you so much for covering my song. You know what I mean? And I guess for me, it was less educational, more awareness. And like people like Jessie Alexander's like she's on my Mount Rushmore of songwriters. And I remember like she wrote like Parker McCollum songs, like Blake Shelton songs, The Climb from Miley Cyrus. I remember I covered her enough where I'd have like a random kid from BFE nowhere be like, hey, like Jessie Alexander, like, she wrote this song, she wrote that song. And I'm like, yeah, like you should listen. She has actually a song she wrote with this brand new artist. You should check it out. And that was always my goals. Like I know I was that kind of listener growing up where if I knew that my favorite writer, Dave Grohl, was from Foo Fighters, was involved with another band or whatever, I would care about them. If Blink-182 took another band on the road, I'd become a fan of them.
And think about how rewarding it is for that person, kid, whoever, from BFE, how you weren't that kid. You had, or I was doing riding the bike.
Yep.
And now this kid is like getting quality information from you and click of a button, or not click of a button, but like producing this
and they could see it, and like it was online, so everyone's stuck at home on their phone, so it's like they could immediately go look up Jessie Alexander, see everything she's been involved in, and then when a brand new artist was coming along and she wrote a song with them, they'd be like, oh, if she's on it, I care.
It was like, really a tool.
Oh,
it started to become this thing where if like, because I know because people
when you guys, who are these people? You know what I mean?
You guys started throwing good love and giving me some flowers. People were DMing me going, bro, you've hit it, dude.
It's incredible. And I think honestly because I was like the oldest guy in the group that was like part of this like songwriting reviewing crew. Like and also I was at home, like my dad's sick, so I'm like. I was in a place where I'm like, I need to be a good person. I'm not going to be online. I'm not going to be a guy talking trash to people. I'm not going to be getting caught up in anything. So I just became the de facto face. So when we start coming to town, I'd be like, hey, I'll book everything. I'll book a place for us to stay, and we'll come to Nashville for 2 weeks and go to writers' rounds, go to concerts, meet artists and songwriters, and just like talk about what they do best and why we believe in them. So I was just the guy that was very visual. I'd interview artists, and like so people would just be like, oh, like I'm the face of this kind of thing. And it was, I think because the time of life I was in. It was
kind of like, you were like, kind of like the pizza, review. You see them, like, oh shit, they're doing something. You see Benji, oh God.
And it was wild, 2020 is such an interesting time, 2021, because it's like Morgan like released Dangerous, and that was like the real boom in country music in my opinion. And then Hardy released Iraq, and that was such a special record to me. Because this is a combination of all my past influences are rock bands, and then all my influences in country, the writing style. And I just remember like obviously being a very passionate fan of what they did and like writing very thorough, informative like reviews about these songs and like what they made me feel, why I thought they were helping people, why it resonated. Like they helped people during a crazy time. Whether it was like Sand in My Boots or Wasted on You, and like everyone was going through a crazy era, and that's why it blew up.
But what do you think it was inside? Was it more raw? Was it more less because you got Hardy, you got Ernest, and you got Morgan that kind of just said, well, I don't know. And I'm sure others too. I don't mean to leave them out, but like, they get together and they just.
And they were writing a lot of those songs during the pandemic. And that's what blew my mind the most is like, how could you be that inspired when like, sometimes it was a struggle to get out of bed during all that time. So I'm like, I think it was that. And also it was the first time in a while where artists were like, number one, they wrote majority of the records. They'd have their favorite few collaborators in town and be like, I'm doing the majority of it because I have nothing better to do. And I think it was that, and also just they're like, hey, like I'm gonna do me to the full extent. So Morgan, you saw like he did do something a little more raw with Dangerous.
That's what I think it was.
It was a little more stripped back on certain songs like Sand in My Boots, 7 Summers. And then he also leaned into his pop stuff because he loves hip hop, loves pop music, and that's why. But he did it so, uniquely to himself and true to himself that's why people were like. A lot of people be like, oh, that's not country, but like with that gravelly vocal over it, you can't mistake it for anything other than country.
When we did the Dangerous album, he was the same way.
Yeah.
There was zero wardrobe. It was blue jeans and a white t-shirt.
So he would have woken up
and that's what he. Yeah.
I think people felt a relatability to that. They're like, hey, he's just like me. And when I met Morgan, I'm like, this is a guy that literally, I think he hadn't left the U.S. till he's like 25 years old. I'm a kid that I was like, I traveled more around the world as a kid because of my dad than the U.S. So like for me, I've only been to Texas, California, New York, now Tennessee, and now I'm slowly but surely like doing the whole world tour essentially. And then with Hardy and Ernest too, it's like Hardy's like, this is me. And even though he like was putting out records initially or EP that was like very country radio sound, and like I remember like his first press release, he's like, oh, like Def Leppard were references thrown out. So I'm like, it's funny seeing kids now that he's doing like a rock album be like, oh, he's not country. I'm like, he was always going to do this. And so, but he was so true to himself. And for me, like him and I are the exact same age. I'm like, oh, raised on the same kind of music. And I'm like, this is the perfect blend that I've been waiting for because rock kind of went to like purgatory for a bit as far as commercial relevance is concerned.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? If it takes a country boy from Mississippi to bring rock and roll back, I don't care what you call it. Yeah. I love this genre. I want it to have its time, and that's what he's doing. Yeah. And Ernest, like I discovered him when he was a rapper, Snow. And I think it was a song called Twisted. And that was the first song I saw. I think it was on MTV.com at the time. And I was like, this is a guy that honestly can just like freestyle rap and all that. And then I'm seeing him all these country songs.
He needed to find his place. He had
to.
The
pendulum had to swing in this town for him to have a moment. And with me being a music nerd, I would I could hear his influence on songs. And when I look at the liner notes or the credits, I'm like, oh, of course he wrote this song. Yeah. So like, I think him being true to himself led to him being a great songwriter in town. And then when it became being an artist, I mean, he could do it all. He could do the contemporary pop thing. And now he obviously grew up and was raised here, so he loves classic country. So we've seen him do that shift, but do it so well and true to himself that like people will never argue. I mean, I still in my best brand, like his final form is freaking Cowgirls. Like that is Ernest. That is an Ernest song through and through. That is him. So, I mean, I think he's going to ring the bell in a week or two. So congrats to him on that. But yes, just it's been very cool to see people where even like Texas people, Parker McCollum, so true to himself, or Parker Wetzel, like they will not change for anybody. But that's why Nashville kind of shifted to do like, how can we make your best self here in Nashville? And I think Parker nailed it. Now's finally kind of come to Nashville and being like, hey, like I built this incredible foundation, but I can actually start collaborating with people I trust and build this even further. Yeah. And he's about to have the biggest record of his career. It's incredible. This Jesse Murph record, man, like it's like charting on the Hot 100. Like, and I remember Jesse Murph, and like I remember fans being like, "What? Like Jesse Murph? This is gonna be a terrible song." It comes, I'm like, I just
met her the other day.
Crazy
with Jelly. Yeah,
But it comes out and it's like the biggest song he's ever done, and I'm like, y'all, these people, they put so much work in. You can always listen to the OG records and have your moment, but like let them evolve. I think rock fans, man, I joke, country fans are pretty gatekeepy, but man, rock fans are even worse. Yeah. If you evolved even a slight bit, if you wanted to get some like top 40 relevance, they crucify you. And I always, like as a kid, there's a website called Absolute Punk, and that was where I discovered all my favorite rock bands. And like, those message boards are brutal. If any band shifted their style or they want to go on pop radio, they would be like, you're dead to me. And I remember being a kid being like, oh, if I ever ran that website, I would not be that way. I'd be like much more thoughtful. And then 10, 15 years later, like I make my own version of absolute punk Country Central, and they're doing the same thing. So things don't change too much.
It just keeps going around. You said, I remember you said, suicide basically when you try to, go a little more commercial, whatever. I got hired in when Shinedown, Shinedown, when they got, when Second Chance, and If You Only Knew. I did those 2 videos, and the whole science behind it was crossing Shinedown over. And now this is a little bit earlier in time. This, I don't even know what era, 2003,
2004,
4 or 5,
like that,
yeah, whatever. No, it couldn't have been. But anyway, to hit VH1 top countdown. So we knew we could hit active MTV countdown
always,
and they wanted to have a visual, have an aesthetic for those 2 songs to make a strong impact at VH1.
Yep.
Which would be crossing it over to the more adult contemporary and all that.
And I love that stuff. So like even for me, even if like I loved like rock and roll, like I had an appreciation for a well-written ballad. Like, I'm like slow song junkie. Sure. You know what I mean?
Big power.
So, power ballads, man. Like, I remember there's a song off of Hardy's first a rock record called "Hate Your Hometown."
Yeah.
I remember hearing that, being like, I'm such like an earworm type of guy, and I'm like, this song sounds so much to me, and it's influenced so much by like. There's a song called by Our Lady Peace called "Somewhere Out There." It was always on VH1 Countdown as a kid. I'd watch music video online, like front to back, every single time to memorize every part. I remember when we were doing Country Central, we had, loved like everything Big Loud was doing, what your team was doing, reviewing all Hardy's records and Earns and Morgan's. And I was lucky enough to meet Joey. I was like, dude, like, I remember we were actually in the studio with Morgan when he was cutting one thing at a time. And like, I love Morgan, but I was like, just nerding out with Joey about like this Hardy record. And I'm like, hey man, like this Hate Your Hometown song, man, it sounds so much like Our Lady Peace Somewhere Out There. He's like, dude, like, cause Joey's Canadian. He's like, dude, you get it. You know what I mean? Like, I just felt like, oh, hey, my ear works. You know what I'm saying? And like, you hear so many more like influences and alignments today. And I'm like, that's why Interpolations blew up in Nashville. Cause it's like, with Cole Swindell, She Had Me at Heads Carolina. Like the reason that was such a massive hit, and deservedly so, is because they took a song, Jody Messina, Heads Carolina, Tails California, and said, hey, like this is someone that has been out of like the cultural mindset for so long. That 15-year-old may not know Jody. I know her, and I want everyone to know who she is. But they took her core song and they recreated it for a whole new generation.
I did the video, and I didn't know her, and
she's awesome. A gem. She's amazing. It's so cool what it did for Cole's career. It's so cool what it did for her. Where now younger folks can be like, oh, she's incredible. And then go listen to songs like Bye Bye Bye, which is like one of my favorite Jody songs. And like and that's something for me. Like obviously in any music industry, it's like if something works, let's do it a million times over. So you won't get, sometimes you'll get interpolations that aren't the same caliber. But to me, it's always about interpolation or any new artist. It's about convincingly and like organically kind of recreating something that is new to a whole new generation, and it's true to what you want to do and what you want to say. And we've seen it happen a couple times in this town, and for as a result, I'm like, I feel like it's the best time to be in Nashville, the coolest time to be a creative in country music, because there's really no huge box anymore.
No, not at
there's
all.
a lot of lanes. You know what I mean?
Now, you left Country Central though?
Yeah. So
you decided to say this rising platform that you helped start, and now you moved into A&R publishing, a whole side of the business. Now I would love to chat with you about, because I don't know a lot about A&R other than, let me think, finding the song or finding the artist. At one point, I know it's song or publishing would be song related,
yes,
but
correct.
A&R, is that finding the artist and going to some small town and finding this rock band and saying they're the next thing, sign them?
It's development is the key word, and like obviously my road to get there, I really credit two people or three people. I mean, Connor Smith was the first guy I ever interviewed, and he's a younger guy, but very just so driven and just such a kind dude. I remember meeting him and interviewed him, and he's like, hey, come out to Whiskey Jam if you're in Nashville. So I go out there and I meet the person that opened up for him is Dylan Marlowe, and he's opened up for him. His guitar player is his producer, Joe Fox, who I now publish. But I met them just as people. So I meet those guys, become friends with them. And then I'm obviously reviewing all these songs, and I'm a huge Thomas Rhett fan. And maybe a lot of kids, they don't always get it, but like he's such a great songwriter, great dude, a great artist. And one day he just like DMs me on Instagram. He's like, hey, what's your cell number? I have some demos I might record for my next record that I just want your feedback on. And I'm just like, how in the world does this guy have any time in the world to like reach out to little old me? And every couple weeks he send me a new song and I'd be like, hey, this would be really good for your live set. Or like, I've heard you do this kind of thing before. Your fans might love it. I don't know if it's going to move the needle for you. Or like, holy moly, this is like a whole new direction. I freaking love this song. I think like 2 songs.
Would you have told him if it was bad?
I mean, I told him I was honest, but I love him. So I was like,
my reason I say that, not to interrupt, is because he is going well outside of his comfort zone.
Totally.
And wanting true feeling advice. Yeah. So you,
and you know,
and you realize you're like,
I would say I'm just always thoughtful with feedback. I'm just like, hey, like if this is something you've done before, like I said, it might resonate with your current fan base, but if you're looking to expand or pull in more people, like maybe there needs to be a little more evolution. But I remember, I think 2 songs, this was like 2 years ago. And I think 2 songs are finally coming out on his new record. So it's like, it's crazy the road and life a song can take to finally come out. But that was a big touch point moment for me because his A&R at Warner Chappell, his name's Spencer Noe. I remember, I think they had dinner and like TR's like, oh, like, man, I've been sending this guy Benji at Country Central some songs. I know and I know now being A&R, I'm sure Spencer was like, who the hell is he sending songs to? I don't know. And I came to town 2 years ago for CMA Fest. I was like a media correspondent. So I was like interviewing a couple artists in town while I was there. And Spencer just reaches out to me and says like, hey, I see you're in Nashville. Like, I really see what you've been building. I'm just curious, like what you're trying to do in town or what business you're trying to build. Like, you want to come by the office and just get to know each other? And I'm like, sure. So I meet the guy, love him, learn his story. I tell him about my life and my road to start coming out to Nashville. And honestly, we just left it as like a good buddies to know in town. You know what I mean? Nothing about music, nothing about working in music. I just kind of went back home and it was just
no
fun.
talk of money or anything.
No talk about, do you want to do publishing? Nothing like that. It's just like, hey, like, I'm like, hey, this kind of is, I have a full-time job at home. And on top of that, I'm taking care of my dad and like, I'm living in this. And this beautiful thing came on the side and it's filling my cup amazingly. But yeah, that's where we left it. And I kind of minded my own business and I went home and he called me up a couple months later being like, hey man, like we have some space on our A&R team. And I know you've never done this before, and we never hire anyone outside Nashville, but you know, like I love the way you analyze music. I love that you're thoughtful about it. And he's like, on top of that, our president, Ben Vaughn, he actually reads some of the stuff you write and he's actually curious to know like if you want to chat with him. So I was like, honestly, man, I have nothing to lose. Like I'm down to have a conversation. So like I meet my namesake, Ben Vaughn, and we have a Zoom and like he's just talking to me about music and about the songs I love. And a lot of the songs I would review happen to be Warner Chappell writers. Oh. You know what I mean? A lot of the songs, like whether it's Way in the Truck, we have Hunter Phelps there. Whether it was, Morgan Wallen's record, we have so many Warner Chappell writers on Dangerous at the time. And I was like, yeah, like, just talking about music. And he's like, well, hey, we have this space on our team. If you're in Nashville next, let's hang out. Like, let's catch up and talk about more music. And I remember all that happening. And I'd interviewed Dan Smyers from Dan and Shay with Country Central. And with Dan, like he was in rock bands and like he was in bands that like I loved as a kid. And he would like go on tour with All Time Low, be like their guitar tech, like crazy stuff like that. So my thing, I remember it was like 2014, I believe, was the first Dan Shay album. I remember, like, I still remember it. It was such like a key moment because I was in California. Like we would always go to California every December for Christmas. And I remember like they released 19 You and Me, and they're like, that was such like they referenced Californian in it. And I remember not even caring like, oh, is this like my favorite kind of country or whatever? I just cared that I saw someone that I loved in the past, like winning and becoming one of the biggest artists ever. And when I interviewed Dan, like afterwards he kept in touch, he's like, hey, I've been hearing like you might be thinking about publishing. And I just remember being like, yeah, it's an incredible opportunity, but I didn't go to college for music. I didn't do all this or that. And he just like stopped me and said like, dude, I see how passionate you are for this. Like you will learn the longer you're there how to do every in and out of publishing, but like being passionate, Ben Vaughn told me the same thing, like being passionate and advocating for this community, like you're doing it already. And you need to trust yourself on that. It's like I credit Dan, Connor Smith, Thomas Rhett so much because I'm like, these are real people I've respected for years that, gave me a shot, that advocated for me. You know what I mean? And then I remember Ben Vaughn had texted me when I was in town. I was interviewing Chase Rice for his last album, I Hate Cowboys, All Dogs Go to Hell. And Ben's like, hey, like I'm at a Waffle House in Brentwood. Like, are you free? And he's like, I'm like, yeah. He's like, come meet me. And like, I remember just packing my backpack and I just drove over there. We hung out. And he's like, hey, here's some of the writers and artists that, you know, are going to need an A&R. And his names I already was super familiar with, like Taylor Phillips, writes for Kane Brown, Morgan, Luke Combs, Joe Fox, who I now publish, who was Dylan Marlowe's producer. Dylan and him wrote Last Night Lonely with their other writer, Jimmy Bell, who I publish as well. So it's like people I was like very personal friends with. And Ben's like, yeah, these are the people you'd be working with. And it was like everything. It was like down the middle radio country. It was Texas country. There's like rock artists. I work with a band called Pecos and the Rooftops. And I'm like, oh, I could work on everything that I already love. So it was a no-brainer to me to do it. And at the time I was like working in like tech sales and paid really well. But I remember just not being inspired. I remember being at home with my dad and being like, God forbid if he was gone tomorrow and I'm like stuck in this job, like you're going to be devastated no matter when it happens. But like, if you're not inspired, like good luck. And I just remember being like, I remember even my boss at the time, like he's a huge country music fan. So he'd start following what I was doing. When I take PTO to come out to Nashville, he'd watch everything. I remember, I think we're going through a down year in the economy. So like no one's buying anything. And I remember and I was not inspired. I wasn't doing the best job. And he had a meeting with me. He's like, do you want to do this? Like, you know, I see you like traveling. You seem like you're having the time of your life and all this kind of stuff. I remember being I was so down. I was like, is he using my personal life against me? Like, is this like, this is so like, this sucks, you know? I remember like the day after that following Friday, Hardy released The Mockingbird and the Crow, the song. Oh, yeah. And dude, I remember getting chills and like feeling like on fire because that song's truly talking about going your own way, being like the black sheep, being the crow. And honestly, I always felt like I was the crow of my family because I was always the guy that, you know, I should have done like a very narrow, straight path, right? And like I didn't do that, and it took me years to finally get here. But that was my life. It felt like my life story. I remember it being on fire. I was like, oh, I have to quit this job. Not even working music at the time, but I need to quit my job and like figure out a way to work remotely and move to Nashville. And I never would have thought that it would lead to me, like, you know, coming here, meeting great publishers, meeting great artists, and then getting a job opportunity to live here full time.
I can, because I've been here longer than you, and I know that this town embraces passion.
Yeah.
And it not only embraces passion, but it's that wanting to do good passion, wanting others to do good passion.
Yeah.
And I really believe, you know, and maybe those waters have been murked up these days with everything, you know, all kinds of things, but the town definitely was that when I first moved here.
It's still the same.
Yeah.
I think it's all about, you know, what you're trying to do here. And I do think like I came here incredibly humbled. I mean, I wasn't ever, I understand I was a bad guy. I mean, who would say that? But I just remember like doing all the right things, getting good grades, going to the right schools, and feeling like I was owed or deserved something. I did things the right way. But life does not work that way.
No.
And it took me a long time to learn that. And I had to be knocked down a million times and like see my dad every day and like learn how to just do things like get out of my comfort zone every single day, like for years, for like 3 years when I was living at home, to the point that I come to Nashville and I'm like, oh, I'm ready to serve, because it's like I'm not here to be a name, to be a big face. I just care about these artists and writers so much that, like, you know, getting back to like, you know, development, it's just about they write songs every single day, and we'll have writers that only write. They're not artists, and we'll have artists that write for their own records, and also we'll have songs they want other artists to record. And we will get those songs turned in as demos, and then we'll go through the process of pitching them or like networking them around town to different labels. Or I partner up with another A&R, another company, if their writers on the song with my people, and we just find creative ways to get these songs heard. And I've learned like there's no one way to go about it, and that's kind of which is kind of the scariest part about it, because that was not the way I lived growing up. I was very narrow, very, you know, process focused. But here it's like there's so many ways to get a song heard, whether it is in like a standard meeting, traditional meeting where like you and I sit across from each other and I play you 10 songs and you say, hey, like this would be great for this artist, or like, I don't know if this hits the mark for them, or building a personal relationship with an artist and like finding an opportunity to play a song for them.
That's what I think my whole career has been based off of artist relationships. Yep. And it sounds to me, and from what you're saying, like would you agree that maybe Country Central allowed you to really network, showcase your get in the rooms and in the door, like you said, get an interview, and then
it helps to do it with no angle. Like I guess like I was meeting like a Connor Smith without I wasn't trying to be his best friend. Like,
you, bro.
Like I'm gonna get money off you. Like I just was like, hey, I love what you're doing. Yeah. If I can help, we can help elevate it. Amazing. And that turned into people like Ernest or Hardy. I'm like, I'm always going to advocate for people that I care about that are making music that speaks to me. Mm-hmm. And on top of that too, it's like, I think it was at the time, you know, we're doing Country Central and like Megan Maroney was like just getting started blowing up. Mm-hmm. And she had released a song called Hair Salon. And I was like, it was not even country references in my brain. It was like, I heard Sheryl Crow. It reminded me of her. It reminded me of freaking, you know, Alanis Morissette. And I was like, oh my Lord, this girl's doing music and a song like that to me is like already like miles ahead of people that have been here forever. Mm-hmm. So she's someone that like advocating for her, loved her music, and to the point where like we'd interview her. I'd come to town for my first CMA Fest and go watch her play her now #1 song, Tennessee Orange, like in a crowd of people. And like no one's even at the time, I guess they weren't really paying attention. But I just remember like meeting her. And she's like this, obviously this very like, you know, talented girl from Georgia. And like, but like her dad was there, her brother was there, and he would play backup guitar for her. And like her dad would be like, oh, this is how like I was a country music fan. And like, I didn't ever work in music, but like I'll play guitar with my kids, and like her and her brother would sing along to songs. And like, I learned, I'm like, okay, like this is not just a flash in the pan. Mm-hmm. This is a girl that was raised up in music. She loves it. And her winning, like, it's no surprise to me. So her being success, I'm like, oh, she's always built for it. It needed to be the right time. So like just having those organic relationships where I'm like, I'm just a trooper for y'all. Now as a publisher, I'm like, that's what I do for my own artists now, for my own writers. I'm their trooper. Like we collaborate. They give me feedback. I give them feedback about ways we can get the best songs to the best people. And I don't know, man, it's been a year and 4 months, but I do think like I got that rhythm down. I know how to advocate for my people in the best way. Every relationship with my writers and artists are different. But I do feel like I'm able to serve them, you know, to the best of my ability, and like everyone's winning. People are so happy, and I think like this is just the coolest time to be an advocate for artists and for songs.
I agree. Are you seeing like when I first moved to Nashville, the idea of songwriting was interesting to me. Yep. Maybe flashing back to what we were saying at the beginning, I didn't know I automatically, coming from the rock side of things, the bands live in the studio. Yep. Yeah, they do their thing.
They
and
write
they make
everything.
It. Yeah, and so when I came here, I noticed a change where publishing was a big thing, and songwriters were everywhere, and they had tiers of songwriters that you would get, and they would get to the artists through their channels. Are you seeing? I feel like I'm seeing another shift, kind of where country music or music maybe coming back to where the artists are kind of putting their, you know, skin in the game.
Yeah.
Is that something?
I mean, like I said, we saw it happen during the pandemic because artists, like people, like weren't sure if they could go to like a regular publishing house and write songs. Like they didn't want to get sick or whatever.
Has that inspired maybe more emotive or
yeah, I mean,
less...
it happened with Dangerous for sure. It happened with The Rock for Hardy, with Ernest Records. Like they had a ton of skin in the game. Like they would find their 1 or 2 or 3 favorite writers, and be like, whatever, we're gonna write songs. And like and that's why you would see like during the pandemic, a lot of it was like artists writing a ton of their own songs. And then you see Zach Bryan come out of the blue,
and he's
Bryan. Just like, you know, freaking Bruce Springsteening it up. He was like Ryan Adams kind of dude, and like, but he was, I think, the first time in a long time, everything was imperfect, stripped back, and people, I guess that's what people need to feel at that time.
You said imperfect. It does. Even Parker, Zach, Morgan, kind of like a unperfect voice. Yep. You can tell it didn't come from years of training in music school, and
even them as personalities, like imperfect.
You want to relate to it a bit,
but that's relatable. It's like, hey, like I'd love to say I'm a perfect guy, but I'm not, and I've taken my lumps in life, and I'm like, oh, if I see Morgan that he is a guy that's like a desperado, like an outlaw, I'm like, well, hey, like I felt like that, and I felt like an outlaw in my family a lot of times. You know what I mean? It's like I related to that guy, and I think fans during a crazy, very imperfect time in our lives, in our world, like they're like, we just need to feel real stuff. We need reality, because right now this does not feel real. I need to hold, if there's reality in music, in media, I'm grabbing on, holding on it tightly. And that's why, in my opinion, Zach has become, I'd say he's one of the biggest artists in the world right now, because of that organic, you know, showcasing of songwriting, of artistry of his live show, everything in between. And you've seen it from Morgan, you've seen it from everybody that's doing it. Luke Combs has showcased like, hey, I'm a real person. And I don't have to look perfect. I look like a lot of real people that live around this country. And that's why you're seeing like, whether it's Lainey Wilson too, she's real, man. And like Lainey, I was listening to her before I even discovered like Morgans or Hardys of the world. And like what her thing for me, why I knew she was going to be a superstar was she'd been here, over 10 years at the time, but her voice, you can't mistake it for anything but country from Louisiana. Yeah. But her music, man, her band, I remember hearing like her first record. I'm like, it sounds like the Rolling Stones. And then that's a big inspiration to her and influence. And I'm like, oh, like this is it's the same thing with Hardy. I'm like, all my favorite influences are playing a role and building these great artist careers. And I'm like, so for her, I'm like, her winning, her become Entertainer of the Year, like it is time. You know what I mean? Like she has been building, working for it, and her doing it, like it's no surprise why it's happening. So I'm like, I knew it back in like 2017, and fast forward now, I'm like, she deserves it, and you're gonna see that more and more and more happening in this town.
What do you say to people who are, you know, in the songwriting world, you know, like, country doesn't sound like country anymore, or they're now labeling genres inside country. There's too much influence, too much outside influence. It's now you see Post Malone coming in. You got Beyonce. You've got Shabuzi.
Doing it, yep.
You got, and I'm not mentioning many, I'm sure, but like just there's a melting pot of styles coming in that you touched on probably 20 minutes ago. What says you about that? And to those people who were like, you know, this isn't country. This isn't down the middle or whatever.
Well, I do think
because now you're in an AR position, and so you're in control of the flow.
Absolutely. No, I just what I say to all those folks is the fact that like honestly, a lot of our creatives and writers like they were raised like you and I. Like they have every influence. A lot of them love classic rock. A lot of them are from the South, and maybe they love countries on the radio or it's in the background, but they have all these other influences. And this new generation of these 20-something-year-olds, like they have every influence in the book. Sure. That's why the music is reflecting it. Yes, there's a million subgenres now, but there's just more lanes for you to create. And if you want to write a classic country song one day, do it. If you want to write a rock song another day, you're able to do anything and everything. And so for me, I just say, that's why I get back to this is the best time to be creative, because do whatever you want. If there's a real fan base that's willing to pay their hard-earned money to see that kind of music live, and you can convincingly write that, you can try it out. There's no restrictions for you. So I feel like there's more freedom for writers. They definitely need to be paid more, but like there's more freedom than ever for them to be creative and to find these artists that are gonna on the cusp of something special happening and being there early and dedicating time and learning their story and being like, well, hey, like I grew up this way. I have this influence. Have you tried this? And I know Post Malone, like he's a student of country music, loves classic country music, loves George Jones, and I think that's why he's been so convincingly, you know, welcomed in the community.
Well, he's so versatile.
You know, I mean, very versatile, and like they see how much he respects this culture, and that's why he's been welcomed with open arms, and that's why we're so excited for this new record.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, something I touch on a lot in my world with visuals. I want to kind of touch on it in the songwriting world with technology, but not how to make it. It's the algorithms and getting music out to people, and not in the is radio dead? How we consume music. I don't listen to radio unless I'm on a travel job and I don't have, you know what I mean? I'm in my phone and I'm going to go to Spotify. I'm going to make my mix or whatever it is. So in your position, are we run? I asked this on a previous guest, and she was a strategist in all of this world, and she says ultimately we're motivated, or the algorithm is motivated by the consumer.
Yes,
I get it. You know, which came first, the tail, you know, the dog or the tail, whatever.
Exactly.
But I feel like I'm not content with that answer, because I feel like me being a creative at heart, at core, who signed on to this gig to be creative and direct and photograph or whatever and live into that world now. And now we have to be these marketing strategists, and you know, we as artists, we have to adhere to this machine or this algorithm that we hear is happening. You got to do this. You got to do this. And I see it all over the music business for people like yourself who are behind the curtain.
Totally.
Is data taking over the art?
I wouldn't say taking over. I think it's a resource now, which is kind of helpful. And honestly, with a lot of younger artists that can be frustrated, like, I gotta do content. I gotta dance on Instagram. Like, I tell them, like, no. I mean, like, so honestly, the people that have resonated the most, the people that are the superstars, are the people that just, it's imperfect. Zach Bryan had the grainiest video on YouTube. Could not see anything, but you heard a voice that was raw. You heard a story of almost poetry in motion in a lot of ways, and that went viral.
Was it intentional?
No, it wasn't. Okay. I think
so
he just had to get, he wanted to get
it
out.
Up and did it, and it was a foggy day.
And I tell folks, I'm like, hey, like, I know we can pay money and you could go on a nice, perfect field or perfect background or whatever, and they'll be like, why didn't this blow up? They get frustrated about it. Well, I'm like, well, hey, like, remember, went through the pandemic. It's tough times for people like save as much money as possible. Like, not a lot of folks can come see you across the country where you're at. Not a lot of these people have money to come to Nashville. Showcase why they should care, why they should want to pay their hard-earned money to see you live. And that does not need to be rehearsed. That can be just you in this office, put your cell phone up, play guitar convincingly, play your best original song that's emotive, showcases a story that you've been through that people can relate to, or find your favorite country song or rock song of all time and give your own true unique spin on it. And it'll be brand new to them. And I've seen that work more than any overproduced production. And I love your music videos, but like in content world, like I think less is more. It's about showcasing like a reason for people to say, hey, after I saw that, I'm going to come pay my money to come see you live. And to honestly, to like your credit, to Tanner's credit that works at Hardy, like during the pandemic, I would just see these like tour recap videos when like they were able to play anywhere that allow them. Sure. And if anything, it made me be like, oh my Lord, as soon as this world opens up, I need to see Coetzel live. I need to see Hardy live. Cause like they would give you a little peek, a day in the life of like what this rock concert, this country concert could look like. And I think fans really resonate with that. And that was produced and it was so well done that I was like, hey, this is like a kind of a music video, a movie into what I could see live. And that's why when the pandemic was done, Coetzel blew up even more. Hardy blew up even more. Morgan, or all those people, because y'all showcased kind of an image, a media content piece of like, hey, like this is what you're paying your money for and it's going to be worth it.
So you would say that the visual medium is still impactful.
It's evolved, you know what I mean? There's no more, it's just the countdowns aren't the same anymore, you know what I mean? And that's like near and dear to my heart, but no, it's like, it's now a tool that you need to be versatile and not just say, this works for this person, let me copy it. No.
Well, you just said something interesting. It might not be this anymore, but now it's this.
Okay? It serves a different purpose.
It serves a different purpose. It's just an ongoing, ever-changing path, I guess,
totally.
Right?
Absolutely.
Since being in music for now 1 year and 4 months, and the journey that you've taken to get here, is there anything you would kind of say to your younger self of maybe to avoid a pitfall or something that you might go, you know what, to your son or future son or something, you know? What would you tell yourself?
I say don't be a prisoner of the moment. Like I know, like me getting here, it feels like it's just such like a God thing. Like I don't feel like I'm supposed to be here, but being here, I remember I get here and I feel like being at home. I lived in the present so much because I'm like, I got my dad. So like, let me enjoy every moment. I kind of put my future on hold. Stop really planning all that kind of stuff to the point where you come to Nashville, music, everything is future focused. You plant seeds that don't pay off or sprout tomorrow. They sprout months or years in the future. And I remember getting here, I'd be like, I think I'd get frozen sometimes being like, am I making the best of this opportunity? Am I doing my best? And I just learned it just takes time. It's time. And you have to be humbled and be open to feedback and leaning and asking every dumb question in the book for your own benefit. So get out of your comfort zone and be comfortable with that. Like I remember being like getting anxiety as a kid, not even knowing what anxiety was, but having that feeling. And it's like, oh, because I'm out of my comfort zone or I'm in a situation I'm not used to. And I'm like, that's every day here.
Sure.
But I got thrown so many out of body, uncomfortable situations the past 3 years. So I'm like, I think I'm kind of okay. And I think it took me like a year here to be like, okay, like the job feels good. I love what I do. I love the people I work with. It's amazing. This community's invited me with open arms. But honestly, like for me, I'm like, oh, I got to invest in my future too. I got to, like, even like you and I are talking about like, oh, like, I'm looking for an apartment right now. And like, even that, like, the most simple thing, like I haven't done that for so many years that like, I just kind of like put it off. I'm like, oh, I'm so busy, I'll do it later. But I'm like, well, now if I go home, I can't be creative because it's not a space that is truly mine. And I'm like, I'll only be a better A&R, a better person, a better brother, a better son if I make sure I invest personal time in myself and invest that to be like, hey, if I want to be here forever, I need to make sure I can be my best self. So I'd say to anyone, to anybody, to myself, to my siblings, to friends, or people that are online or in the world, they're like, I'm passionate too. How do I even get started? Is like, people aren't going to give it to you. You know what I mean? And I had to learn that the hard way. It's like, oh, you can't just do all the right things and it happens. It's like, you have to eventually build something and it will come. You know what I mean? And I was blessed and lucky enough that I met a very, brilliant creative person, and we kind of were able to play like our best roles together. And I was able to get here. And I didn't even know I was building something at the time. It just felt like it was happening. But I look back, I'm like, yeah, I was booking flights, I was paying for Airbnbs, and I was happy to do it because it was filling my cup. It was inspiring me. It was making me want to work harder for my family, for myself, for my friends, you know what I mean? And now like I get to live this amazing life here, and I get to continue to build, you know what I mean? So like building, development, that's the whole name of the game in A&R. I need to develop my life too to be the best A&R.
Yeah, you're still in almost, I guess you are out of rookie year, right?
Yep.
What do you love most about Nashville? In the scene?
Man, I do love just nowadays, like you said, like so many people, it's a melting pot now, but I just love artists. I love vision. I love that I can sit down with a younger artist or even an established artist and be like, this is how I see your music for me. This is how maybe I see your fans resonating with it. And have you thought about this idea? Have you thought about maybe releasing, a song in this format or this capacity? Have you thought about this kind of visual? Like I was with my older brother who's like, in sales and is a rock star there. Like he was the creative guy growing up. He was like a perfectionist artist. He could draw like a lifelike image. And I'm like, I never had that. I could not draw for anything. Yeah. So I remember thinking like, I'm not creative. Like I can't draw, I can't sing, I can play guitar a little bit. And I've just learned creativity means a lot of different things.
There you go.
And for me, being creative is like face-to-face communication with people, hearing their stories, sharing mine, and being like, hey, there's some alignment here. And I know other people that love your music can relate to the same thing I'm relating to. And it's been really fun working with artists, like with the artists I work with at Warner Chappell, like we really get to dig in, like their people, their management, and like their labels, like they trust me and they empower me to do it. Ben Vaughn's like, go for it. If you want to try something, go for it. You know what I mean? Awesome. There's no restriction. And because of that, I've been able to see a lot of really special artists develop and get comfortable, find their tribes in town. And now, like when things work, I'm like, it's no surprise when the fans are like, have no idea what goes the whole behind the scenes. And my joke's always fans are smarter than we give them credit for, but there's so much that they don't know, that all the work that goes on behind the scenes of people, business people here that devote their lives to this, and artists and writers, you know what I mean? So for me, true. Seeing it come together, introducing younger writers to like established artists that I'm friends with, and like seeing it work and them get what their gift is, you know what I mean? Them writing songs together and building this cool world. I mean, like that's the most inspiring part here. And like the coolest thing that happened recently was we were at Whiskey Jam during CMA Fest, and one of our writers, she's a fiddle player, and we're all just hanging out during the show watching Co-Wetzel. And then MGK was going to play Spotify House, and his management team was in town. They're like, hey, like we need a fiddle player or a violinist to perform with him because he wants to do a country cover. And I think they did There's Your Trouble, like the Chicks, you know what I mean? Yeah. So they did that song. And I remember just being there in person, present. I'm like, oh, she's a fiddle player. And like, if we weren't there at that time, if I didn't have that relationship and was just intentional and like cared, like literally we got that locked in like 8 hours. Like the next day, like we just like, she goes out to rehearse with him that night. She's performing at MGK. And it's like, if I can do more stuff like that, that did not feel like work. If I can do that, man, I can be here for 100 years. You know what I mean? It's like, that is what will keep me here. And that's what I love about this town is that relationships are everything, but true, genuine ones are where I'm like, I didn't do that to get something out of, our writer, our artist. I didn't do that to get free tickets to MGK concert. I did that because I'm like, this makes sense in my brain. I know how talented this person is. I know that MGK actually is a real big fan of this, and the cover went off incredibly well. And I'm like, you know what? Like, why not try it? You know what I mean? And like to see everyone react to it and be like, this is incredible. And then for fans to have no idea how that actually went about, like that's the coolest thing ever. And it gets me on fire.
I love that story. So thanks for sharing it. Yeah. Were you at, The Bluebird with
the Bluebird?
With the now everybody's talking about the Laney and Post Malone.
It was incredible, man.
What was that?
Hey,
that
Post Malone, man, did his first writer show.
Just came in.
No, I think he pops into town every now and then. But
get me up on that small covert.
Right.
Just swing in,
Laney.
Laney.
Popping to Bluebird, casual. But dude, it was incredible. Post did his thing, played his country songs, played his original stuff, and like I remember being like at the Bluebird. I go there a couple times, and like it's like listening room where like I'm quiet, I'm respectful, and all that kind of stuff. But like I want to say it was when like Laney's destroying it, Ashley Gorley's doing his thing, and then Ernest was in the room. So they do Ernest and Laney's collab, What If I Could? And like after that moment, man, I just saw like the energy shift. Like everyone loosened up, everyone was cheering the loudest I've ever heard the Bluebird. And then from there, like Post goes into I Have Some Help, and then it's just like the phones are out, and like no one cares. Everyone's allowed to film, and it's like it's the rowdiest Bluebird show of my life. But it was like that's Nashville. That is what it's all about. That is why this community is so special.
Yeah.
And in regardless of the melting pot part of it, it will continue to be special because everyone is just a fan of music, of all different kinds of music. And Post Malone is a showcase. Like you can come from whatever world, but if you have real appreciation for the history of it, you care about the actual the craft, the writers that are involved, the players, the guitar players, the producers, you can do whatever you want, and that's why it's working. That's why he's winning here, doing this thing. You know what I mean?
And he's showing that he does care about the process.
Yeah, so it's amazing.
Brother, honestly, I'm stoked you're living out your dream.
I appreciate
that,
bro.
I'm even more stoked that you took the time to come here and
I appreciate the invitation, dude. You've been a legend in my life. You've done all my favorite music videos since I was a kid, and who would have known we'd be doing this now? And now you're doing it for all my favorite artists. It's supposed to happen that way.
Yeah, I believe in
Who would have thought? Spring, Texas, breeding country music creatives. Who knew?
Spring, Texas in the house.
Shout out Spring, Texas. Thank y'all so much.